Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about conditional statements and all that goes along with conditional statements. So, conditional statements are a statement that can be written in if-then form. In other words, if something happens, then a reaction to that first part of the statement will occur as well. Okay, they're always going to be written in if-then form. And in our symbolic form, we do P with an arrow Q. Once again, we do the lowercase letters and they're generally italicized for us as well. And it's read if P then Q, or if you want the more proper mathematical term, it says P implies Q, meaning that that's going to cause it to happen. And we've got two parts to this. The hypothesis is the phrase immediately following the word if. And what I would encourage you to do, just as you get comfortable doing it, is to underline the hypothesis in any one of your statements. It just helps identify things as you go through. The conclusion is the phrase immediately following the word then, and that is something that I'm going to encourage that you guys circle when you're doing these. So we're going to circle the conclusion and we're going to underline the hypothesis. It just makes everything go a little bit smoother as you go through these. So let's take a look at one example of a conditional statement. I want you to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of this statement. If you live in Nashville, then you live in Tennessee. So if we look closely, the part immediately following the if says you live in Nashville. Okay, so that's our part, that's our hypothesis here. Okay, after the then statement, it says you live in Tennessee. Okay, so our hypothesis is that if I'm living in Nashville, then it has to be true that I live in Tennessee. And this happens to be true, so our truth value for this statement would also be true. Try this one on your own. Pause the video and take a look at it on yourself, and then I will go over that. Okay, so it says if the sum of the measures of two angles is 90 degrees, then they are complementary angles. Okay, so our hypothesis here is the sum of the measures of two angles is 90 degrees. Okay? And our conclusion here is that they are complementary angles. Okay, so I'll circle my conclusion. And once again, if we have two angles, they're added together and they equal 90 degrees, we do in fact have complementary angles. Okay, so our truth value here would be true as well. And the last one I'll have you look at quickly, and then I will start talking after I give you a second to pause. Okay. Our hypothesis in this, right after the if, is a quadrilateral is a square, and the conclusion is it has 4 right angles. And once again, this is also true. So now that we looked at these conditional statements, there's 3 other types or variations of conditional statements that we can have. Okay, the first one, these are all called related conditionals. Okay, the first one we're going to look at is the inverse of a conditional statement. And this is formed by negating the hypothesis and the conclusion. We talked about negation in the previous video. Okay, and our symbolic form for this is not P, then an arrow, and then not Q. Okay, and that means if we were to use our previous example here, if you don't live in Nashville, then you don't live in Tennessee. Okay, once again, that would stay true. Okay, so that's the example of an inverse. Second one is the converse, not the shoe. And converses are formed by switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. So in other words, we have if Q, then P. And this can cause some problems. Sometimes these are not always true. If we think about our statement before, it said that if we lived in Nashville, then we lived in Tennessee. If we flipped those, it would say, if you live in Tennessee, then you live in Nashville. Well, there's more than just one town in Tennessee. So that one is not entirely true. So just be aware of that sometimes the truth value changes when we use these related conditionals. The last one we're going to talk about is called the contrapositive. Okay, it's got the longest name because we're doing the most to it. It's formed by negating and switching the hypothesis and conclusion. So this one reads, if not Q, then not P. Okay, so this states in our first example there that if you don't live in Tennessee, then you don't live in Nashville. This one happens to be true here. So you see there's four different ones. We've got our regular conditional, we've got our inverse, negating both sides, we've got our converse, where we switch the order, and then we've got our contrapositive, where we negate and we switch. So I'm going to leave you with this example, and we're going to do this as a do now in class tomorrow. I want you to write the inverse, the converse, and the contrapositive for the following conditional statement at the bottom. And I want you to determine the truth value for each one. And just like always, remember, if the truth value is false, we have to provide a counterexample. So take a look at the statement, if it is a Saturday, then there is no school. We'll take a look at this in class, and good luck with the rest of the work.